All right, thank you. So I'd entertain a motion to bring this meeting to order.
Motion to open.
A second?
Second that motion.
All right, all those in favor of opening the meeting? Aye.
Aye.
Since you're on remote, you gotta do a roll call. So just, there's three of you here, so just want to do a roll call for each member.
All right, Eric Chilton votes aye.
Dennis Natoli votes aye.
Andrew Veo votes aye.
Okay, Bob's not here.
All right, so we've opened the meeting. The next item on the agenda is historical minutes. And I believe that I submitted a packet of candidate minutes via email in the last 4 weeks. Were those able to be distributed?
Did you send them to me? I don't think I saw them.
All right, well, maybe we can table that until next time.
Yeah, just resend them to me and I'll include them in the next meeting invite.
Thank you. Are there meeting minutes for the meeting from the 7th of February 2022 to review?
Yep. Yeah, those were submitted to the team before the prior meeting in March.
All right, I'll have to.
Is there any discussion, questions, concerns about the minutes from the meeting of February 7th?
I have none.
I'd entertain a motion to accept the meetings as submitted.
Motion to accept as submitted.
Seconded.
All those in favor, Eric Chilton votes aye.
Dennis Natoli votes aye.
Andrew Veo votes aye.
All right, the minutes are accepted. February 7th, 2022 minutes. Thank you, Mr. Veo, for preparing those.
You're welcome.
It seems that some of the items that were discussed in February will be tabled this evening as we'll discuss some items for the town meeting. The first of which being the registered marijuana dispensary bylaw.
All right, through the chair, I've got a quick update on a couple of these articles I received this morning from the Attorney General. I'm not sure if you saw this. Yeah, Tristan Liberty's in the audience here at Town Hall. Two of the articles have changes, on changes that were approved at town meeting last October. On Friday, the Attorney General's office requested another extension of 30 days to review both height changes as well as the table uses and description uses for another 30 days, which would put us either to or past town meeting. So I'm waiting to confirm from town council, but I don't think that we can vote on something at town meeting, or the town meeting members can't vote on something that is contingent on changes that were supposed to have been done in October. I don't see how that can work. The committee is, of course, free to look at these now, but I think what's going to likely happen is the proposed multifamily housing change will have to be tabled, and possibly the marijuana dispensary change might have to be tabled. But again, that's kind of pending town council. So like I said, Tristan Liberty is here. He's one of the proponents of the marijuana, so we can discuss that, whether it goes forward this spring or it comes back in the fall. We'll kind of play it by ear.
All right, so I mean, would we then invite Mr. Liberty to speak about the red lines that were shared on the registered marijuana dispensary bylaw?
Sure, yeah.
Is that appropriate?
Yes. Grab a seat. You just come to the microphone so you can hear.
All right. Can everyone hear me okay if I use this mic? Okay,
Yeah, perfect.
great. I know we had some problems with it before. So I'm sorry, Adam, I may not have gotten the same update that you did. Through the chair to Adam Menard, was the Attorney General's update for anything related to changing of the zoning or changing of the recreational marijuana bylaw? I know we pulled that.
It would be the changing to the zoning, particularly the table 8 uses section that you had indicated. Some changes to the changes we made in October haven't been approved yet, so I think it's kind of out of order, unfortunately, with the delay to make further changes to the table. If we don't know what was approved in October will be officially approved by the Attorney General.
Okay.
Unfortunately, it's taken them 6 months to go through this.
Okay. So with that, because I hadn't gotten that update before coming in tonight, so I apologize to everyone. The intention of the board with this policy or this change in the zoning bylaws was to lower the restrictions on medical marijuana dispensaries to make it easier for a dispensary to find a location that's adequate in coming to town. I think the board's approach, given that change and that update, will probably be to remove the table or anything that would be under review by the Attorney General and keep everything else in the bylaw proposal as you all see it right now. The majority of the board has indicated that they'd be in favor of pushing whatever they can at town meeting to try to lower these restrictions as soon as we can. I don't know if any members have any specific questions. One of the reasons that we wanted to bring it before you guys tonight was to see if there were any recommendations for changes and also to try to get your support at town meeting for the article. So if that's the direction that we have to go in, where we're going to remove the table to make it fit the standards of the Attorney General, then I think the board would be willing to do that, and then is open to any other recommendations from the board.
Thank you for that introduction. It's certainly not, in my view, it's not the zoning bylaw review's place to, decide whether or not we would encourage or discourage specific uses. And certainly, I think it's in the voting members' place to do that, is my perspective. And my only question, recalling the development of this bylaw, was that the definition for a registered marijuana dispensary included cultivation facilities and processing facilities in addition to retail facilities in the same definition. And that combination of maybe more industrial or intensive uses combined with the potential for a retail establishment was one of the principal motivators for limiting the zones within which it could occur to general industrial, and by also for having some distance restrictions based on the potential for that use. And so then I'd open it up for discussion if anybody else had further comments, concerns, questions.
Yeah, I mean, I just, through the chair, I'd like to know, at least on the site restrictions, we worked quite a bit on all these back then, and I see that the site restrictions for uses that are, near schools and facilities like that were cut in half. I want to know, what's the reason for, making them closer to schools, gyms, parks, and things of that nature.
Sure. Thank you for the question. Through the chair, One of the big reasons for those changes specifically was the board looked at the regulations on liquor stores and bars, places that serve alcohol. As of right now, medical marijuana dispensaries are allowed in town. Under mass law, we cannot ban medical dispensaries. However, recreational facilities are still banned. That we had discussed, I think that has been removed from the bylaw before you tonight. So we won't be pursuing that in this bylaw because it wouldn't be legal to actually go through and change that ban just going through town meeting. So that'll have to be a vote of the voters. So what all we're talking about right now with regard to this bylaw will be medical dispensaries, since that's all that's allowed. And the majority of the board, were under the belief that there really shouldn't be any additional restrictions on marijuana dispensaries as opposed to alcohol. Alcohol shouldn't get the better treatment between the two. There's no reason to prefer alcohol to certainly medical marijuana dispensaries. We're really looking at a medical dispensary, no recreation, as really the equivalent to a CVS, somewhere where someone would be going to get a prescription. And while we believe that even if it was a recreational facility, treating it like alcohol would be appropriate, certainly if we're limiting to a medical facility, then we believe that there really shouldn't be the same or increased restrictions. It shouldn't be harder to set up a CVS or somewhere where for someone to get the medical treatment that they need than it would be to find a liquor store or a bar. So that was the reasoning for lowering those restrictions.
What about the point that the definition of registered marijuana dispensary, that they could cultivate or process these items, and so it could be a very industrial type use and not a CVS?
Mm-hmm. So for a cultivation facility, under the state requirements, these are going to happen indoors inside a facility that almost looks like a closed-off building with vents. So you're not going to see the massive industrial complexes that I think people will picture when they picture an industrial zone. So the board felt that we could allow those in the same areas in commercial districts, as long as we weren't putting them in a residential area.
What was the thought process behind striking the restrictions on the aquifer zones?
We, excuse me, through the chair, we didn't believe them to be relevant or necessary at all. We felt that they were put in place when there was still a lot of confusion as to what was going to go into these facilities. And if there was going to be cultivation, then perhaps it would be outdoors. You don't know what could be in the fertilizer, and maybe that's the reason for not wanting it to be in the aquifer zone. We know now that the state is requiring them to be grown inside. So given that information, and I guess a couple of years now that we really haven't seen any reason to keep it out of an aquifer zone, we thought that the bylaw, that line in the bylaw was superfluous. It was just unnecessary. So we thought it would be best to remove it, to give them a little more leeway if there was an appropriate site in an aquifer zone.
Do you know what fertilizers and pesticides or anything that's used that's considered hazardous to our water?
I don't know any off the top of my head, but I do know that these will be grown indoors and that there haven't been any incidents of any kind of fertilizer leaking into the soil. Also, in reviewing these zoning bylaws from the surrounding communities, it seems out of place.
Yeah, I mean, the bylaws for the aquifer really weren't meant. Almost all the toxins things mostly are stored indoors. Things happen, like say if there's a fire extinguishers go off, the waters get The floors get wet, water washes the toxins out and into the aquifer. It doesn't matter if it's indoor or outdoor storage. The hazardous materials that could possibly be in there is the reason we didn't put it in the aquifer. I mean, there's almost all the leaks that we've had in different industrial zones. They were done through spill and things like that, through warehousing and things like that. So, I mean, what's the thought? It's just because you don't think it might happen?
Through the chair, no, the thought isn't that it won't happen. The thought was that this line in the bylaw seemed to be put in place as just a way to kind of push these facilities out of where they really could be, with little justification from, again, the surrounding communities that have not seemed to adopt these kinds of restrictions.
The surrounding communities that haven't adopted the aquifer protection, do they maintain a public water supply fueled by groundwater wells and in the same area and having the same contributing area as the buildable area that would be zoned for these? I'm thinking of a Charlton or a Dudley or something like that, I don't believe that they have significant municipal water supplies. Many of the community are on private wells.
Through the chair, Oxford is, through private wells as well. Auburn is not municipally run water either. However, if this were a legitimate concern in Oxford as well, then I would think that they wouldn't want anything to leak into the public wells or the wells that people were using either. Just because it's being run through a company, I don't see as changing the outcome. Again, in the last several years that these facilities have been running, there has been no instance of THC or any kind of fertilizer leaking into the soil. Pesticides, again, is being grown indoors. I wouldn't even see a need to use pesticides. Herbicides, again, it's being grown indoors. There's really not in individual pots. I and the majority of the board don't see the reason in trying to limit where these facilities can go when they're going to be grown indoors in individual pots away from everything.
Maybe we should at least put in, for if they are going to store fertilizers that are hazardous at all, amounts, quantities, and storage, containment, all those should be in there.
You got me a pen.
Where we had, anything that's agriculture and they're using fertilizers, we've always made sure that we're kept in an area that's contained. And we like to know amounts and quantities, because it would violate anything like that would also violate the aquifer bylaws.
Okay, through the chair. So what I'm hearing would be an additional limit, but this would be a general limit, not just specific to marijuana dispensaries, but any kind of agriculture in which we're limiting or requesting to know what kind of pesticides, herbicides, and fertilizers are being stored on the premises.
Yeah, basically anything that could be hazardous in the aquifer.
Yeah, I don't have the reference in front of me for the state regulations around the medical dispensaries at this time, but I think that if I recall, it was either the state or general fire marshal regulations where you were registering inventories of chemicals Might it be covered elsewhere?
Through the chair, I don't know if it's somewhere else in the bylaws. If we have anything else, I defer to Adam to see if you know.
Through the chair, any hazardous chemicals is governed by the fire department. There is a general bylaw that covers hazardous materials and hazardous waste.
Oh, it's under general. Okay.
If the facility were to reach certain Tier 2 reporting standards that carry a certain amount of chemicals or toxic materials on site, they have to report those yearly to both the fire department as well as the state.
Could I ask about the inclusion of development in the open space district?
Sure. So the changes to that section would be under special permit, under review by the planning board.
To the chair, could I make a point on that? I was going to bring this up in later, but
Sure.
the open space district is residential only. I wasn't sure what the thinking was, or if that was something that selectmen knew about. In the open space, special permit normally applies to subdivisions that are newly built that have excess land that they're retaining as open space. And having it separate from the deeds, from the buildable lots. So I wasn't sure either if the board knew about it or what the thinking of that was. My suggestion would be to just strike that additional open space. And actually in the table, it uses the entire open space section, and the table is going to be removed per fall town meeting, simply because it applies to the whole town, but it's residential only.
Okay. Through the chair, so the board didn't understand that it was under residential only, and that's going to be removed anyway. Since it's going to be removed, then yeah, we can amend that and strike that so that the special permit would just be not allowed under, since we weren't allowing it under residential anyway. Yeah, so that would be I'm sure that would be no problem changing it on the board's end.
Through the chair, I had another suggestion, if you don't mind. With the temporary moratorium portion being struck, I would suggest striking the entire moratorium, which would include the definitions 3.3.2, as well as the severability. I'm not sure if the AG would allow striking only part of the moratorium. If you wanted to save the definitions, I would suggest you move those to 9.3.13.0, the definitions there. Copy and paste.
Okay. Through the chair, the only reason we were keeping the definitions is because we wanted to keep the references made later on in the zoning bylaws, so we can strike it under the temporary moratorium and move that under its own section. So that will keep the definitions throughout. Through the chair to Mr. Menard, would you recommend keeping the definitions, or do you think that they can be removed entirely?
I don't think it would hurt to keep them,
Okay.
just in case they're needed for any clarification purposes in the future.
Okay. I'll make that change.
Question on what might be a typo in section 9.3.13.2, site restrictions, paragraph G. No marijuana or marijuana-based products shall be sold, strike in black, not red, or grown or cultivated
Yes, that may be a typo since it's not in.
On a lot used for residential purposes, similar to the previous, that was on discussion. Is that an intended strike?
Through the chair, since it's not in red, I don't believe that's an intended strike. The only reason I could think that it would have been intended to be struck is so that it doesn't prevent individuals from growing marijuana products of their own volition in their own homes. But I don't believe that that was intended since it's not in red. Through the chair to Mr. Menard, I don't believe the town is able to prevent people from growing marijuana in their own homes anyway. I don't know if you have any idea on that.
They're allowed to grow,
Okay.
depending on the state law, 6 to 12 plants, I think it is.
Okay, so given that, through the chair, I do think that was a typo. We can remove that. Thank you for pointing that out.
Wonder if he's having a commentary on subsection L following that about hours of operation extending from 8 p.m. acceptable closing time to 10.
Yep, through the chair. We extended the closing time to what the facilities around Auburn would be. Again, since we're looking at this as applying to medical facilities, we allow CVSs to be open later. We wouldn't want to prevent people from going at that time. Changing it to 10 p.m. wouldn't mean that they'd have to stay open. If we did get a medical marijuana dispensary, they probably wouldn't be open that late, I wouldn't imagine. But we wanted to give them that flexibility in case they had patients that wanted to come in later to pick up their prescriptions.
Thank you.
Question, has the chief of police commented on these changes at all?
The acting chief of police has not commented on, excuse me, through the chair, the acting police chief has not commented on any of the changes to my knowledge.
Because if I remember correctly, I think a lot of the things that we worked on was from some recommendations by Chief Salukis at the time.
I think it's important to remember that the regulatory environment was significantly different at that time, right? But certainly it seems a judicious use of time and resources to reach out to the chief of police and ask for any additional commentary.
Through the chair, I'll make a note of that and make sure to send it out to Acting Chief Lemon and ask for his input when he's able to, and see if there are any recommendations on his end or if he has any notes that he'd like to provide to the board before this goes before town meeting. The draft that I'll send to Acting Chief Lemon will be with the changes that we already discussed. So removing the typo, changing the open space from a special permit to no, and then removing the definitions and re-adding them in a separate section.
Thank you. Question for the attendees about the special permit duration. The original, this is in 9.3.13.4, renewals and expirations. Previously, the term of a special permit was 1 year with 3 year successive renewal periods. The edit is the initial term of 3 years with a 5-year renewal period. I'd ask for any commentary from the members present.
Through the chair, before you have comments, the special permit was only for the open space district, so without the open space being applicable, there wouldn't be a special permit. So those lines wouldn't be necessary to change.
So it seems that that would strike the entire section.
Through the chair, yes, looking at that now, my comment probably would have been the same as Mr. Menard's, that since we've removed the only special permit section, we'd probably take out that entire section as well.
And section 9.6, special permit granting authority responsibility. Would that also be struck?
Through the chair, yeah, I would imagine that we wouldn't need to grant the planning board special permitting authority if there were no sites or zones in town that required a special permit. So we'd strike that as well. Again, this will be subject, these changes now will be subject to the whole board. I plan to bring this back with these changes to the board for their support, since the original draft before you was what was voted on by the members.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Are there sections of the annotated bylaw that have not been discussed to the satisfaction of members present?
Well, I'm just wondering, you know, I mean, I guess for some reason there's a push to make these things easier. Then it's easier to get a marijuana medical, dispensary. It's easier to get that than a church. So I think these things need a little more scrutiny than a church. I'm not for just everything by right. No site plan approval, no special permitting.
Through the chair, they'd still require site plan approval if there was a new construction. It may behoove the petitioner and the selectmen to change those all to site plan approval, just to have the planning board review anything. That's kind of standard for most uses across the board, but it's up to the selectmen, I think, to determine that.
Through the chair to Mr. Menard, so you're suggesting to add a line that would be similar to anything else, just asking that site plan goes through. Okay, I can add that as well.
That's pretty standard for most uses. And honestly, I'm thinking about it, anything new that comes in like this will be a change of use for any currently built building, so it requires site plan initially anyways. So,
but it wouldn't hurt to have it written.
Rock kind of covered for anything new that comes in. That's allowed by right. You still need some kind of approval. Usually changing use triggers site plan.
Are there any other questions, concerns, comments about this particular agenda item tonight? I have a question to Mr. Menard and also to the rest of the members present. Apart from providing our commentary, as we've already done, is there any other role that we should play as the zoning bylaw review committee? Should we hold a vote to say that we have reviewed it and have no further comments? I don't believe that it's in our purview to approve, reject, but I'd leave it to you folks.
Yeah, and through the chair, if the board were to vote yes or no, or approve, not approve, recommend, not recommend, this would still be moving forward in the process. There's a public hearing for planning board already scheduled, and this will be on town meeting regardless of whether it gets, continued or votes upon a town meeting. So that this board's purview is more for review and suggestions like you've done tonight.
Through the chair to Mr. Menard, I just want to ask one more question if I can. So with the explanation that the Attorney General will be reviewing the zoning table at the top of the page, would you recommend removing that from the draft bylaw going before town meeting as it stands now, or what would your recommendation be?
If you're not including the open space portion, that was the only change to this line that happened in the fall.
Okay.
It might be all right to leave it. We can talk to town council about that for his thoughts. The rest of it wouldn't be affected by the Attorney General's continued review, so that could easily move forward. It's just the table that we might have to question town council on.
Okay, thank you. And through the chair to the members of the board, I would say that we'll leave the table in, make that change. So the changes that, final count on the changes that I've written down as recommendations, removing the definitions and replacing them in a separate section, switching the special permit removal to a no, correcting the typo, sending this copy once those changes are made to Chief Lemon and include language for site plan approval through zoning.
I think that jives with my understanding as well. That list.
Thank you.
All right. So I wonder, do we move on to the next agenda item, having discussed this?
Through the chair,
Hearing no objections.
Through the chair, I have no other comments to add to the medical marijuana portion.
Thank you. All right. So I guess we'll move on. Mr. Menard, are there any other attendees present that we should expedite their discussions?
No, there are not.
So I thank Mr. Liberty for joining us and educating us about the select board's discussions.
Through the chair, thank you very much for letting me come in and for making your suggestions. I'll bring them back to the board. I'm sure these changes they'll have no problem with. So I really do appreciate you all taking a look and suggesting those changes, catching the typo and everything else. So thank you very much.
You're welcome. Be well.
Thank you. You too.
Give me 1 second. I'll be right back.
Eric,
Yes.
is the audio on your side as garbled as it is on mine when Adam speaks? Because I can barely make out what he's saying.
Yes. I could hear Mr. Liberty very clearly, and
Yep.
I heard a distinct half-second echo in every statement that Mr. Menard made.
I think we might suggest, I think there's some open mics around him. So when Mr. Liberty was speaking, he was, it was just the one mic we were picking up. It's echoing. I can't even hear what he's saying half the time. So
I had to close my eyes and concentrate very hard.
Yeah. So maybe we make a suggestion that he can close off some of those mics around him, or move to the other mic that Mr. Liberty was speaking through.
That one was working quite well, yeah.
Yeah.
I know I didn't speak much, but could you hear me clearly or no?
No, you're getting you're kind of echoey as well.
Oh, that's all right.
Just a very small sign.
I don't have much to add.
Mr. Menard.
Yes, I hear my name.
Yeah, the mics in town hall are they're getting so garbled I can barely understand, except when the selectman was speaking, his mic was isolated and it was very clear. But yours and Andrew's are can't understand what you're saying most of the time.
Unfortunately, that's common for most meetings. That's why we try to have these meetings in person for the most part, just with the hybrid option. But we're open, so if you want to come to town hall next time, you can hear me then.
Yeah, I think it's an issue of the audio from my audio background. You got a couple of open mics, and what's happening is it's echoing through the other mics.
Yeah.
So if you can isolate one microphone, the one you're speaking on would be great. Or
We can't do that. That's for cable. You can't do it.
okay.
All right. So with the permission of the members present, the next agenda item is multi-family housing. I believe this was on by right document that was shared.
Yes, so the reason for this change is basically the state's telling us we have to. In order to be eligible for certain grants, as an MBTA community, which Auburn is, we need to allow apartments by right, which is site plan approval in this case. That's really the only rationale for the change, so we remain eligible for these grant programs, which are some major funders. They include MassWorks and a couple others, so there's could be potentially a lot of money tied to if we are ever eligible for these grants. Without this change, we can't even apply to them. But I will also add, because of the Attorney General's indeterminate decision yet on the table of uses that was made back last fall, we can't really make these changes this spring because they're pending on changes that happened 6 months ago, 5 months ago. So I think this one is going to have to be tabled at town meeting. We'll have to pick it up in the fall. Hopefully we'll get a decision from the AG as soon as possible, but it's their timetable to respond to us with their approval or not of fall town meetings changes.
Question, how much discretion do we have as the zoning bylaw review committee? If this is the law, is it just a selection of where we alter the use table from special permit to site plan approval?
Essentially, yes. We need to have a certain amount of area of town that complies with this new state law. My thinking in adding it to the RA, RB, and LB is they're already fairly densely settled. A lot of the lots, at least in the RA, are small lots. They couldn't support an apartment building, which it limits it, but it doesn't limit it in the eyes of the law as written now. That was really my rationale for those particular lots or districts. So I'm open to suggestions or thoughts.
Through the chair to Adam and the committee, I guess why wouldn't we also include RC and RR? Is it due to they have more private water use or?
Yeah, partly, and that's more the quote-unquote rural area of town. It's more towards the Oxford side and the Leicester side. There are bigger lots, but there isn't really any water capable of supporting the apartments. If your goal was to restrict apartments, then you would allow them there because they couldn't, without extending the municipal water, you couldn't have apartments. At least not very big ones. I suppose you could have private wells, but I don't know enough about those to how big capacity they can make those to provide water for a large apartment structure.
Makes sense.
Yeah, without the infrastructure, sewer.
Right.
All right. It makes sense to me that table this until we learn more from the AG. But the logic it also makes sense, and so I look forward to either saying something about this in the future when it's appropriate, or not saying anything. All right. Any questions, comments, concerns about that item?
I'm good.
Hearing none. Animal bylaw, next item.
I can speak to that briefly, and if you have detailed questions, I can go see if the animal control office is available. But essentially, inspectional services wanted to bring this back. It failed at town meeting last fall. They made a couple tweaks to the language, very minimal, based off the comments at town meeting last year. If you were at town meeting, I presume you heard some of them. But essentially, the language is the same as it was last year when you reviewed it at that point.
I don't have any additional comments or concerns about these edits.
Yeah, I mean, the intent of this change is really to expand what people are allowed by the zoning right to have as animals. Right now, what we have on the books is very limited. It's not really enforceable. This adds allowed uses. It allows, if people have complaints, this gives guidance for the animal control to respond, like nuisance pets or chickens running the neighborhood or that kind of thing. No one wants to take away your animals. We need something in place so we can monitor and make sure the animals are taken care of properly and animal control can respond. And it does allow people to have more animals.
Any questions, comments, concerns from the members present?
None for me.
None for myself either.
None for me.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for allowing us to review it.
No problem.
The next item on the agenda is zoning changes, discussion future zoning changes. And this is, I believe, a continuation of some of the conversations that we've had in prior meetings. Looking specifically at, we had started looking at residential large lots. All right, RR,
Yep.
RC.
I think we were looking at dimensional at the time.
Yes. And I did have in looking at this, the dimensional and the by residential zone, the dimensional restrictions table, I had a sort of a brainwave that in the right-hand side, there's a list of notes, numbered notes, 1, 2, 3. I don't think that it's entirely clear that those are numbered notes that apply to any time that they're referenced in the rest of the table. And it might make it more clear if they were moved to a footnote.
And
even we in the meeting were getting confused.
Yeah, through the chair, that is one of the changes. And before the HA, we did rearrange that. So hopefully that goes through.
It's so simple, but man, we got ourselves turned around, I think, on that. So
yeah, it is confusing. Oh, and this committee asked me to get them some information. I'm still waiting to hear back from the assessor. I'll have to remind them about lots in the RR and RC districts, size and how many and all that. I did go back and look up to see the number of houses on in the RA district that are 8,000 square feet to 10,000 square feet. They're non-conforming. There are approximately 500 houses that are non-conforming that are between 8,000 and 10,000 square feet. So that was my thought process of changing that lot size.
Apologies, I've just closed my bylaws. I'm just trying to catch up.
Do you have a copy of those old books, the old zoning books?
Need to get you one. Been waiting until the AG approves.
Right. No, I know. Yeah, that's what I figured. I'd wait to ask, but.
Once I hear from the Attorney General, I plan on printing everybody some new bylaw books. So you'll all get fresh ones at some point, hopefully soon.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, my newest one is 4 years old.
Yeah.
All right. Could I get a reminder of where we were in the review of RC and RR? Had we gone through the full descriptions, or were we still discussing the dimension table?
I think we were discussing the dimension table only because of I think it was brought up the lack of available lots for, that there really isn't much for sale or available building lots anywhere in town. That you're lucky to find 2 or 3 at a time throughout the whole town. So whether some of the dimensional requirements made sense, is 60,000 too much? Should it go to 40? A building acre, 180 frontage.
Yeah, the garages and sheds being 7 feet or 10 feet, right?
Well, in the RR, they're big lots, so they have a lot of room to put things around. But I remember on the zoning board, we were turning down building lots that because they were, they missed by 10 feet on a frontage, and we just couldn't allow it because it wasn't allowed. Same thing with a building lot that's in RR that's 50,000 square feet is still not allowed. So someone could, there's land that's probably available should those requirements shrink a little bit, but
is there a general principle that can help to guide us on what a reasonable minimum lot area and lot frontage might be if we wanted to pursue this concept?
To the chair, I'm not sure what other towns, their sizes are. The quarter acre, or the 10,000 square feet is kind of standard for a smaller lot.
Yeah.
Whether you want to have something that's small in the RR and RC is, I'm not sure, but say if it's, I think it's 160, Andrew, is it 160 for RR?
For RR, it is
180.
180 frontage.
Yeah.
So that, to me, that's 2 acres, that's a sizable lot. Even if you were to cut that in half or into a third, say, that would add a lot of possible buildable lots. Say 100, say keep it 100 feet of frontage, because that's pretty common. That's currently in existence in some of the other lots. And then just have like a farther back lot so you can fit more in side by side instead of having a wider lot.
So does that mean the proposal would be to modify the dimensional regulations table for the RR zones to have a 100-foot minimum lot frontage? The RR and
I mean,
RC?
100 is you know, it's a good size, but for the bigger lots, I mean, I just think the 180 was excessive. We're 160 on others, but I would like to know, I mean, there's probably a lot of non-conforming lots in RR. Can we get that information from the assessor?
Yeah.
As far as frontage wise?
Yeah, I can see if they can pull that.
Solely would the thought be that, you know, if there was some threshold that was reached, some number of lots or some average size of non-conforming lots or something, maybe we would use that piece of information to guide the discussion on RR or RC?
Well, it would be interesting to know, at least, you know, there may be just a handful of lots that actually meet this bylaw. You know what I mean? In RR.
Yeah, like the proportion conforming, non-conforming.
Yeah. I mean, if there's more non-conforming lots in RR than there are conforming, then we probably, you know, could be good, you know, go the other way on it. But again, the original discussion was maybe trying to get some more lots, you know, and utilizing that part of the town rather than shrinking, you know, the more dense parts of towns already, you know, smaller lots.
So it sounds like we would benefit from maybe a more comprehensive summary report from the assessor, potentially, and I'm not sure, I don't know what the workload is to do this, but to identify some key statistics for each of the zoning districts to inform not only this current large lot residential discussion, but the future walkthrough of other zones. Is there a way to get a summary of like count of non-conforming lots, count of total lots in the zone? Is this, I mean, some of these dimensional things are kind of finicky to determine. Am I wrong?
Yeah, they could pull a spreadsheet that has all all different kinds of information on it. I would have to figure out a way to do a search of the sizes that we're looking for, the non-conforming, or what's more than 180, what's less. I'd have to figure out some formulas to do that, but it's possible.
Before we request that, I mean, would such a summary table be beneficial to this discussion? Ask the member.
The only reason I would say it's relevant because I'm not looking to change the character of a zone. You know what I mean? But if we're in the RR and if there are under that limit already, so the character is really not to change because it's already that way. You know what I mean? But if it's not, you know what I mean, you might have to, you know, look at it differently. But if if the character is where they're, say, 140 frontage is the common, you know, and an acre of property, or then it's not going to really, it's already there, and it's not going to change the character by having the bylaw change with it. You know what I'm saying? But if all the houses, most of them aren't conforming to this bylaw, then, you know, then we might have to look at it, because now changing the dimension is going to change the characteristics of that area as well.
Okay. I just feel like there's, you know, if we were to make such a request of the assessor's office or of Mr. Menard, and is that correct, Mr. Menard? You'd be doing it probably, like you'd get a big spreadsheet from the office, and then you'd be doing the analysis. It seems. I feel like if we did that we'd have to be very specific about what we wanted to know, right? We don't necessarily want to fish around and say, oh, well, what else can we find? I think we want to know, like, what is the count of such a thing, or what is the average frontage of such a thing? And so it might behoove us to spend a little bit of time thinking about, do we actually need that information? If we had it, would we change the way we discussed it, and then potentially provide like an actual list of the numbers that we wanted, rather than just say, wouldn't it be nice if we had a summary table and let somebody else struggle to infer what we meant? Please.
If you want to think about what kind of data you want, that will direct my time into searching the spreadsheets. You know, an average size frontage, that's easy enough to come up with.
That's the energy efficiency initiative.
It is.
Still.
Counting how many non-conforming, say, that's not impossible, but would take some finagling to do. It's certainly doable.
Right. Even an average, you know, a mean average of the frontage. I don't have to have the exact numbers. So
yeah, I can play around with the data. I don't mind playing around with the data. I just don't guarantee the results you're looking for.
Yeah. Well, I'm not. I guess I was trying to say that I'm not even certain, beyond the couple of metrics that we've identified, that we even know what the other numbers that we're looking for are, right? I mean, if I looked at the dimensional table from a minimum lot area perspective, it looks like it's doubling, right? RA is 10,000, and then you double it when you go to RB. Like, there's a certain logic there, and then you double it again when you go to RC. Just trying to infer the existing logic, right? Rather than invent some logic from whole cloth, I just want to infer an existing logic. And so if we're proposing reducing the size or the frontage of the larger residential lots, I think that it makes sense to consider at least that scaling logic. Does that then extend to RB and RC? Or do we just restrict the discussion to RR?
I mean, I would think RC and RR mainly, right? I mean, obviously, we know we're not going to really touch RA and RB.
yeah, I think we will. Looking at not looking at the smaller lots as a potential for this too much, but then I think the potential is really in the large lots. So.
Yeah, and that density will be accomplished by that multifamily site plan approval, right, in RARB. I'm just thinking about in conjunction with the master plan statements to, increase, housing options and housing diversity. So, I think both of these actions further that.
Yeah, I agree.
So, please.
I'm just agreeing.
We've got about a 3-second lag between when I speak and when you hear it and when you speak when I hear it. All right, so I guess we're requesting probably average frontage by zone, particularly in the residential zones. I think that would be a really important metric I'm hearing.
Yeah.
And it might also, to the extent that it's possible, to just identify whether the frontage itself is conforming or non-conforming, right? Rather than if any zoning district dimension is conforming or non-conforming, the area, then independently check the frontage, then check the front setback. No, I don't think that's going to be really helpful. It would be just, how does conforming frontage versus non-conforming frontage break out in terms of numbers? If we had that, then that might guide us towards a revised minimum lot frontage for RR and potentially RC. Is that where we're going?
Yeah, I mean, that's the way we're going to investigate, see what that actually does for us, opening up areas for town.
Okay.
Like I say, if most of the town is conforming to this, then, you don't want to change it really too much. But if there's 140, 160 in RR, then RR 180, then maybe that could open up something.
Okay. All right. I'm conscious of the time. It's 7:10. I'm sure Mr. Menard has been at the town hall for the day. Seems like we're not going to be able to identify what the number that we would propose would be until we get more data. And I wonder if we might table that discussion and move on to new business unforeseen by the chair, identifying the next meeting's date and adjournment. With your permission.
Yeah, he's got his dog.
Are there any unforeseen items?
I have none.
Oh,
All right, so then it would be identifying the next meeting.
the next date is May 2nd or 3rd. That's the day before town meeting. Do you want to meet that date? May 2nd.
Any objections to May 2nd discussing, picking up the residential RRRC frontage discussion?
No objections for me.
No objections from me either.
All right, I'm going to try to make a concerted effort to attend in person, 6 p.m.
Yeah, myself as well, so.
All right. Any other questions, concerns, comments before we move to adjourn?
No.
All right, I'd entertain a motion to adjourn.
A motion to adjourn.
I'll second that motion.
Eric Chilton's in favor of adjournment.
And totally in favor.
Andrew Vail in favor.
All right.
All right. The meeting's adjourned. Thank you, everybody, for your participation.
Everyone have a good night.
Thanks.
Good night, guys.